Hey, Cubs fans, and welcome to a brand new edition of Cubs on Tap. I am Ron Luce, joined today by the one and only Joe Maris. Before we get into today's game, Cubs lost. We already know that. How are you doing, sir?
I'm all right. Yeah. First game of the series against the Royals. It's not like they're playing a good team or anything, you know. It's Cubs versus Royals on a Friday afternoon. So
Oh my God, I'm sorry. The way that, just the way you're like, I'm all right. Just like that kind of embodies what it is right now to be a Cubs fan. That's why I got a good giggle out of it.
I got a Red Sox friend, and I've been bugging him about the way the Red Sox have been playing, and he'll send in the NL Central standings. I'm like, what does that do to me anymore? Like, it doesn't do the same that it would have last year or 2 years ago. Like, it's just not the same.
You're like, I'm already hurt. You can't hurt me anymore. I'm already numb. It doesn't matter when I'm already numb.
The only thing I see are the good things at this point.
Yeah, right. And we're here to talk a little bit about those good things. But before we get to the good things, unfortunately, we do have to address, I guess, a little bad, and that's today's game because the Cubs did lose to the Royals 6-2. Sal Perez had 2 home runs today. For the Royals, their backup catcher, actually Gallagher, came into the game too and hit one off of Jewell in the 9th inning then, or in the 8th inning, I think, one or 2 innings.
Top of the 9th.
Yeah, Benintendi had one today too. So if you're like me and have Benintendi on your fantasy team, it was a good day. But that's really about all that bought us today. And Patty-wise, he goes deep today. Obviously, Ian Happ gets an RBI today on his little single, little base running blunder, kind of screwed the Cubs out of an extra run there, but we'll talk about that here in a little bit. Unfortunately, though, Joe, while we're talking about today's game, I mean, let's be honest, the most notable thing is Davies, and we'll get to Davies in a second, but the streak is over for Frank Schwindel, and I'm a little upset. I'm a little upset.
Yeah. And Matt Duffy had a 10-gamer hit streak going, too, and that ended.
Yeah, it just sucked. Ortega was 0 for 4. Legend of Rafael, 0 for 4. Like, Schwindel was 0 for 4. Duffy wasn't great today. Like, there wasn't a whole lot to get excited about besides Patrick Wisdom literally nuking a ball on the wavelength. Other than that, it's about all the Cubs had going today. But first, Joe, I want to get your thoughts on the Davies start because you and I talked a little bit before we jumped on. Not a good day for Davies. His final line on the day is as follows. He did go 6. I think that's at least worth mentioning. He actually made it through 6 innings. But 5 hits, 4 runs, all earned. Only 1 walk, 5 Ks. But again, really all the damage coming off of Davies was the long ball. I mean, he really didn't give up a ton of hits today. He really didn't look all that terrible. It's just when he got hit hard, and he got hit for home runs.
Yeah, I really didn't think he was that bad, to be honest. Obviously, solo home runs or just home runs in general just kill you, especially if you give up 4 of them. But he was moving like walk. When he's been able to keep his walks low, he's actually done pretty well. And I didn't think he was too bad today. Just unfortunately gave up 4 home runs. And they mentioned on the broadcast that today is just one of those days at Wrigley. So you got to do your best to keep it out of the air, and he just couldn't do it today. But overall, he's definitely had way worse.
Oh, 100%. I agree with you. I really don't think he was all that awful. I mean, when you look at the stat line, sure, people will be like, wow, that's not good. But you look at it, and it's like, well, it's 4 home runs. It's like, literally, that's all the really hard contact he had. He only gave up 1 other hit than those 4 home runs today. So, obviously, 4 home runs is, like you said, still not good, but all things considered, it wasn't like he really struggled the whole day. It was just when he got hit hard. And that ultimately, kind of screwed the pooch for the Cubs today. Because they were in this game. They had an early lead, a quick 1-0 lead off the Patty-wise nuke. And then they come back, 2 men on with Davies at third and Ortega at second. Ian Happ comes through, single. Looked like it was a 2-run single. And then he slipped or whatever, rounding first, and gets tagged out before Ortega can touch the plate, so the run doesn't count. So they only get 1 out of that, which that alone is a huge misplay in my opinion. And then you add on top of it then that they just don't do anything the rest of the day offensively, and the long ball just killed them. And again, it's a perfect day. I mean, you saw Wisdom's home run. You saw all the other ones that happened. Like, they were not – many of them – the ones that weren't cheap shots, you knew were like, oh, yeah, that thing's gone. But then even the ones that were cheap shots, they got into the basket because, like you said, it's one of those days at Wrigley. It's a Friday in August when it's 87 degrees out. The wind's blowing out at Wrigley. Like, you put a ball into that jet stream, and it's going. And that's exactly what happened, unfortunately, on a couple instances today for the Royals. They get a couple out, and Not a whole lot there that the Cubs can do. But Joe, I want to get your thoughts because again, you played baseball in college. I did not. I actually never played baseball. Fun fact. But in an instance like that with the base running, just as a manager, as a teammate, as just somebody in the organization, how pissed off does that make you? Not necessarily like at Ian Happ, but just as like a holy shit, we can't catch a break.
Right, and I think that's the best way to describe it because realistically, Happ is trying to do the right thing by going out there getting an aggressive turn because if that throw goes home over the cutoff man, he's standing on second base. Just so happens that he slips, ball hits the cutoff man perfectly, and the cutoff man is 2 steps away from him. So it's exactly like what you said. It's just like he can't catch a break. Like just one time, like he was trying to do the right thing, footing got caught underneath him, and they didn't score a run because of it. And Ortega, I don't want to like you could see he's slowed up a little bit, but if you're like you could say he's probably should be watching the ball a little bit. But at the same time, you're not supposed to watch the ball while you run because it's just a tough situation because if he's, sprinting all the way through, he probably makes it. But it's just one of those things,
Yeah, I agree. Exactly. It's just unfortunate the way that happened. And again, I mean, that's just kind of going to be the definition really of the Cubs season for the rest of the year is when things go wrong, they're going to go really wrong. And when things magically do go right, like the last 2 days when they won baseball games, you can talk about it and be excited about it and hopefully find something positive. And even from today's game, I think really the only positives I can draw from it is Wisdom is just having an insane season in terms of power. I think, less than 250 plate appearances, and he almost has 20 home runs already. I mean, that's unheard of numbers in the MLB. I mean,
it's funny. I was while I was watching, they're showing his numbers, during his at bat, and I'm like, man, I see 18 homers. Like, man, it'd be sweet if he got to 20. Next pitch, it just snooks one, and I'm like, well, I think he's got a good chance.
Yeah, I mean,
his batting average has dropped substantially to like he's hitting around 250.
Yeah,
but that slugging is at like 570.
Yeah,
he's been able to, so that gives you some confidence going forward.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you nailed it perfectly. I mean, 253 is where his average currently sits, but that 852 OPS, thanks to the slugging really carrying that, has been nice. I mean, isn't it ironic that in today's game there were 5 Cubs that appeared in today's game that had an OPS greater than 850? When was the last time we could say that about this lineup in the last 3 years? And I know some of these guys have a small sample size, but like, Ortega's played enough games now where like I'm impressed by I think his OPS is very impressive right now. He's in right around, I think it's like 874. Did I read that? Yeah, 874. But Schwindel's at 947 again, just because of the tear that he went on with all the extra base hits. Wisdom's at 852. Hermosillo again, super early, but he's at a 952 thanks to the slugging with the home run. And then Chirinos, who has played enough, in my opinion, to this point. His average is 278, but his OPS is a 974. So, I mean, it's weird, right? It's like, it's a lost season. They suck, but like, it's cool seeing some of these guys have this individual success. And to your point, I think Patrick Wisdom is one. I really think he has an outside chance at 25. I really do. Like, if he gets like consistent, like everyday playing time, like he should down the stretch here, I don't see why he can't hit 25. Right. And who knows if he gets hot in September, maybe he like starts sniffing 30.
Yeah, so he's at 19. There's probably about 10, 30, 40 games left?
About 30, 35 games. Yeah.
Why not? I'll root for it. Yeah. And that's the same thing with Happ. If Happ somehow got that number to 20, I think he's at 14. So if he can somehow get that number to 20, I mean, you'd be feeling a little bit more confident.
Oh, 100%. It would be nice.
Wisdom should play every day. Happ should play every day. Those are like the guys you're like, all right, those guys are in the lineup every single day. And then Horner, when he comes back, maybe not as like he's in the lineup every day just so we can see what we got. You're putting him in there because, you just want him to get more playing time because he's still young and hasn't really played a full major league season yet. So,
right. Nope, I totally agree with you. And to your point about both of those guys getting their numbers up, they are going to play every day. There's 38 games left in the season. 2 of those games will be 7 innings because they play a doubleheader with the Cardinals later in September. But otherwise, to your point, so there's about 38 games left where Wisdom can can do some damage and maybe get that personal number up to. Again, I would love to see him get to 25. I think that'd be an incredible story, given that he really didn't come up until the middle of May. And, and wasn't even playing every day at that point because the Cubs were still competitive and, they actually looked like a real baseball team and not a farm system team. But, he's still putting up incredible numbers in very limited plate appearances. And I think it's absolutely worth celebrating. And again, he's on a very financially, he'll be with the team next year. I don't see why he's not. Even if he is a bench guy, I think he can start next year, even if they add some pieces. I really don't think there's a lot of guys at third base just in the system in general that are ready to come up.
Yeah, I think there's two spots. I mean, even if they want to get somebody else in at third base, you put them over at first. I personally like to see him stay at third. We talked about that on Wednesday, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, he's got great arm, good glove for third base. Like, he's a guy that, it's not like you're like, oh, his bat's great, we can just hide him at first. It's like, no. He's a good defender. Like, he's actually a very good defender.
That keeps him on the team regardless.
Yeah, I agree. I think his arm and his glove alone should keep him on the roster. And again, you add in I don't know why it got so dark here for me. It's a little lighting issues here. Sorry about that. But it's really weird, just like the season he's having, right? Because it's like so few plate appearances. Like, he's an older guy, but like he might have just saved his career with this year. Like, he might be a guy that now, even if it is only for a couple years, maybe he feels like a David Bodie-esque role on this team of, hey, I can play a couple different spots. I'm a good bat off the bench. And when I play, there's a chance that I'm going to go yard and hit nukes. And he's still hitting 250. I mean, I'll take 250 out of a guy like Patrick Wisdom, especially if he's going to slug the way he's slugging.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I'll take
a no-brainer.
Yeah, I'll take 250 and 35 home runs across a full, 100 and let's call it 140 games maybe that he plays. If he plays a full season with the Cubs, I'll take that. I'll take that every day of the week. I'll sign up wherever I can find that. But I also like your point about Happ. Again, he gets a big base hit today that drives in a run. All things considered, it should have been 2 runs, but neither here nor there. Some of these guys, again, that literally the fun of the season for us at the major league level is who's going to be here next year, and are these guys going to have a major league job next year? Because a lot of these guys are just competing for that next contract. So that'll certainly be interesting to see. Let's see what else. Pitching, again, we touched on Davies. The pen wasn't much better. It was the C, I call it the C squad today. Outside of maybe Brothers, he's kind of a B squad guy, but he was the best pitcher for the Cubs today, ironically, which is just if there isn't something that defines the 2021 Cubs season like that, that's just all you need to know. When Rex Brothers is your best pitcher out in general, starters or relievers, that's just kind of a sign of the times. But Joe, you and I talked about it very briefly before we got on. Not a lot of good things to talk about today. Worth mentioning, I do want to say to anybody that is listening live, there's a couple of you guys here. Make sure you tune into the Tennessee Smokies tonight. Yeah,
definitely. I know I'll be watching. Brendan Davis, Morel, and Caleb Killian is pitching. I'm actually really much looking forward to that.
I am pissed that I'm not going to be able to watch. I will be on the microphone over at St. Xavier University calling a men's soccer game, but I'm actually recording it. Like, I'm going to watch it when I get home.
Because I mean, you're really big on Killian.
I am big on Killian. I might be the biggest Killian stan of the Cubs on Tap group, and I might continue to ride that train, especially if he has a really good rest of the season now. Obviously, he struggled a little bit when he first came to Tennessee, but if you look at his numbers from high A ball and double A ball when he was out west still as a part of the Giants before the trade, those numbers are stupid good. Like, that's video game numbers. I mean, when you debut in double A and you make like 13 starts at double A for whatever San Francisco's double A team is, he had like a 2.50 ERA.
Nice.
And like 2 complete games, a shutout. His K to walk ratio is stupid. If I remember correctly, I want to say at the double A level, it's 64-8 is his K to walks. Like
8-1, huh?
Literally video game numbers. Yeah. Like
that's like Hendricks if he had more strikeouts.
Yes, literally. That's exactly what it is. I mean, he's a guy I'm excited about. I really think Killian is a guy that if he continues to pitch really well, especially at double A, because double A is really like what they consider the big test.
That's your jump pad right there.
Yeah. So like if he continues to do what he's done at double A this year, I think he starts the season next year in AAA, and I think we see him at some point in 2022. I really do.
I think just thinking about spring training next year, you're going to see a ton of you're going to see these guys. We'll see Brennan Davis. Yeah. You'll see Killian. A lot of those guys, Morel. You see all these guys, especially all the guys in AA. You'll see them in spring training. I mean, that's just standard.
Yeah.
And that's more or less a little bit of a tryout. And we'll get to watch them on TV for, we're just finally starting to get to be able to watch them regularly on TV.
Right.
So we'll have a nice little, 30 days of getting to watch them take at bats. So,
yeah. Yeah, I think the Cubs on Tap crew might be investing in MILB TV next year.
Yeah.
We're going to have a lot of prospect talk to talk about. Even if the Cubs are somewhat competitive in the NL Central and maybe they sign a couple guys in the winter and it's a different looking squad and at least they're at least hovering around 500, they'll be a little more fun to talk about than they are right now. But again, a lot of people are going to have their sights on, 2023 and beyond with these kids, Preciado, Casey, the re-ranking, anybody that's a prospect nerd, MLB.com just re-ranked all the top 30s for each team as well as their top 100. Brennan Davis moving all the way up to 14 now. So he's a top 15 prospect in all of baseball. Braylon Marquez, unfortunately, dropping way down to 95, I believe is what it was. And then Amaya totally dropping out of the top 100. He was there at one point. Obviously, injuries is certainly hurting his stock, at least around the league. I think the Cubs are still very high on Amaya and are really worried. But when you're hurt and you lose an entire year of development in 2020, it's very easy to be like, crap, well, we expected him to be ready by now, and he's not because he's hurt. So, unfortunately, that's kind of a downer for the Cubs. But my word was my point, I guess, being, excuse me. Don't worry about the Cubs' loss today. Push it aside. And if you are home tonight, you got nothing else better to watch, go tune in into the Smokies. Again, Joe's going to be watching. Maybe Joe will be tweeting about it a little bit. Follow Joe at Joe Maris on Twitter, and you guys can talk about it. And I'll be pissed because then I got to rewatch it later, and I want to watch it live with everybody else. But I'll be catching that Killian start later on in the day. But Joe, any final thoughts on the game today? Because you and I have something that we're both very excited to talk about. We've each written about this player that's going to start for the Cubs tomorrow. And I think everybody knows who it is at this point. But do you have any final thoughts on today's loss?
Nope, nothing at all. I'm ready to move on.
I love it. I think that's how we're going to feel too. I'm moving on because that man did not get a hit today. Ortega was 0 for 4. He did get on base though, and he should have scored a run. So
yeah,
the legend of Rafael continues, and my jersey purchase is still makes me
validated.
It is validated, and I'm very excited about it. But Joe, as we mentioned, we're going to do a little more in terms of diving into tomorrow's game, ladies and gentlemen, because we won't probably be around for a podcast unless one of the Cubs on Tap members just does kind of an impromptu solo show or something like that. But again, normally we don't do Saturday shows, which in this case is kind of a downer because at 1:20 on August 21st, which is Saturday at beautiful Wrigley Field, when the Kansas City Royals and the Chicago Cubs play, Keegan Thompson takes the mound for his first start since April. For those that are probably like, well, isn't this his first start? No, he did technically start one of the doubleheader games against the Dodgers way back in April when they swept them. Which feels like a freaking lifetime ago at this point.
Yeah, I was at the first game that day.
Oh, there you go.
Like forever ago.
Yeah, really. I mean, it's crazy how it literally feels like a different season. Like that's literally what it feels like. I mean, that was when everybody's all hyped. Cody was getting ready to eat an entire jar of mayonnaise. Yeah. It was a different era in Cubs on Tap. It was a different era in Cubs baseball in general is what it feels like. But unfortunately, we're talking about what we're talking about now. But again, excited for tomorrow. Keegan Thompson taking on Chris Bubik for the Royals. The left-hander for the Royals is 3-6 on the year, 5.09 ERA and 73 Ks. As for Keegan, he's 3-2 on the season. He has, earned some wins and losses out of the pen. 2.21 ERA, that's a very nice number, and 43 strikeouts for the young right-hander. Usual suspects, if you're watching and listening in each of these markets, KCSP 610 and Valley Sports Kansas City if you are out in KC. And if you are in Chicago, 670 The Score, WRTO 1200, and Marquee Sports Network are where you will find tomorrow's game. But, Joe, let's talk a little bit about the Keegan Thompson start and kind of just what's been going on. So you and I both wrote about it. I wrote an article just talking about how good he had been, how we'll probably see him sooner than later. And bada bing, bada boom, one thing led to another. We talked a little bit about it. We're like, he probably goes one or two more starts down in Iowa, and then he comes up. Nope, they bring him up way sooner than any of us expected.
Right.
And then you just got that news today, and you actually shared. So I'm going to recommend everybody that's listening to read Joe's article over at www.ontapsportsnet.com, kind of a what you're looking for tomorrow. So do you want to share some of those thoughts about what you're looking for in tomorrow's game with Keegan Thompson?
Right. So I think, first off, the most important thing to understand here is he's not going to go deep in the game. Mm-hmm. He has yet to eclipse 70 pitches. He threw 61 in his last start with Iowa, which was 4 1/3 innings, and he didn't allow any base runners, 7 Ks, no walks, no hits. So they 61 pitches, you're done. So expect something similar. I'd be surprised if he eclipsed 75, but he'll probably near it, depending on how the game is. I mean, they're gonna look to get him out. They're not gonna wait around. They're gonna go get him out. It's not gonna be the same thing with Justin Steele, because Justin Steele had a little bit more time to work himself up. And Thompson will get there. It's just happening in Iowa. It's going to happen in Chicago a little bit more. I think that had a little bit to do with the fact that Arrieta got released, Alzolai's gone, or on the IL. So I think that maybe robbed Thompson of 1 to 2 more starts in Iowa. But regardless, I'm excited. I mean, the one thing when looking at it, I was looking at his one start, trying to figure out his pitch percentage, his velocity. His fastball percentage in his one start was like 22% compared to 44%, which is like a season average. Mm-hmm. So he threw it like 50% less of the time, which is crazy. And that he replaced him with cutters. And he pitched pretty well at that. I don't think he gave up any runs. He didn't pitch. I think he only went 3 1/3 maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, that sounds about right.
Right. So I'm kind of curious to see whether or not that's maybe more of his starting pitcher, his mentality is to attack with that cutter more often than that fastball. But he's got a good fastball. While he was in the major leagues, his fastball average was just under 95. But in Iowa, according to some tweets from the Iowa Cubs commentator Alex Cohen, he was sitting 94 to 96 and touching 97. So I'm thinking, watching that radar gun, we're going to see some 97s. Which I am pumped to see.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, man. And yeah, just bringing up that those numbers for you, I said April. That was incorrect. It was May, but nonetheless,
I thought it was in April too.
It was May 4th. I mean, it was literally like it might as well have been freaking April. In Chicago, May and April are practically the same month. But nonetheless, like you said, he went 3 2/3 in that outing, gave up 2 hits, walked 2, but also struck out 2. So. Overall, very good day. Didn't allow any runs. Clean sheet for him. I mean, he actually didn't allow his first run until May 31st, which quick math, almost his 10th appearance. It actually was his 10th appearance. Holy shit! Look at me, quick math. Nonetheless, so I mean, he's been very good this year, and like you mentioned as well in your article, like this isn't the first time that he's going to be going more than an inning at the big league level. Where we had that concern with Justin Steele when he initially came up was, hey, you haven't really pitched more than an inning here or an inning there. Maybe you went a little over an inning, but like most of the time he was under 2 innings, and that's why it was really important to get him stretched out. Keegan Thompson was regularly doing like 3 innings of work out of the pen, 2 1/3, 3. Like he was a little further along, and maybe that's why they felt more comfortable bringing him up a little sooner, because he was already a little more stretched out than Steele was, just by the way he was being used out of the pen with the Cubs. So maybe that's a part of it too. But I agree, man. I'm pumped. I agree with you. I think maybe the approach for him is, because guys can sit back on the fastball a little more at the big league level, that cutter is important to him because it allows him to, get a little more movement, fool the hitters a little more, maybe sets up that fastball even more as well, because then they start looking cutter, and then you come hit them with a 4-seam right down the pipe on the inside corner or something, and you get that called strike. So I would like to see a 97 as well. Heat is cool and tough, as we like to say here at OnTap Sportsnet. Yeah. So if he's bringing the heat tomorrow, I'll be pumped. I unfortunately will not be able to watch the game either. I'll be watching I'll be at the grown Cubs version of sports in Chicago, which is the Chicago Bears. I'll be at the Bears tomorrow. I'll be watching Fields take on Mitchell Trubisky, which I'm very excited for. But I will be keeping up with Keegan, and I'm sure all the Cubs on Tap guys will be as well. So be sure you're tuning in with us. But yeah, man, I love everything you said. Your article was fantastic, by the way. It really hit on a lot of good things. It's just like, hey, these are the reasons I think you said it in your article. Like, these are the reasons that Cubs fans should get excited for the rest of 2021. It is the Justin Steele starts. It's the Keegan Thompson starts, because this is a glimpse into the future. I mean, there's a lot of guys that are going to be coming up here in the next year or two that are competing for rotation spots. So for guys like Thompson and Steele right now, this is their opportunity to kind of grab the bull by the horns and say, hey, I belong in this rotation. I don't give a shit who you sign. I don't care who's coming up from the minors. This is mine. And they can really do that here in 2021. I think Justin Steele's done a good job with it so far. I think he's really shown that, hey, he's got the ability to be, I would say, worst case scenario, like a 4, in most big league rotations. Let's see what Keegan does. Let's see what we get out of Keegan Thompson. And then in addition to that, because these guys are going to be competing against guys that we've talked about at length here. They're going to be competing against the Ryan Jensens of the world, who just got promoted to Double-A from High A ball South Bend the other day, because he's been absolutely dynamite in South Bend. So he's now in Tennessee. You got Killian, who could be pushing for a roster spot next season. Jordan Wicks, who finally started throwing and was the Cubs' first-round pick this year, already the 6th-ranked prospect in the Cubs system, which makes him the 2nd highest-ranked pitcher in the Cubs system now, only trailing Marquez, as we mentioned earlier. Does he push for a roster? Do the Cubs go sign a guy like a Marcus Stroman or a John Gray, or what? There are so many what ifs that these are very important starts for Keegan Thompson and Justin Steele. So that alone is worth getting your popcorn ready, maybe getting out to the ballpark and catching a game where one of these two guys is on the mound. I don't know how it's going to shape up, but I'm hoping
right
for the game that I have tickets to next, which is in September, that one of these two guys is starting, because just again, that gets you more hype for it. Granted, I'll also be there. I will be there for the KB Returns to Wrigley series. I'll be there for that Saturday game when they play the Giants.
That sounds nice.
Yeah, it'll be good. Long story short, not to deviate too much for those that are listening about the Cubs, obviously with us talk here, but my buddy and I, we've talked about doing this for years. He's a big Sox fan. I'm obviously a big Cubs fan. We finally found it. There is one Saturday for the whole season. We looked at this in April. There was one Saturday for the whole season where the Cubs played a day game at 1:20 and the Sox played a night game at home. And it happens on September 11th. So we're going Cubs-Giants earlier in the day. Get to see KB return to Wrigley. And then in the evening,
hop on the red line.
we'll see the Boston Red Sox on the south side then against the White
Sox.
So that'll be cool. Yeah, it's going to be a couple good matchups.
Schwarber, hopefully, yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited. It'll be good. But hopefully, just tying it all back together, I really hope Keegan or Justin are on the mound that day, because these two they're going to be fun to watch. And that alone is worth people tuning in. But I'm tired of hearing my own voice. Joe, do you have any other thoughts about tomorrow's game outside of Keegan Thompson? And do you have a Flag W player before we go ahead and start to wrap this thing up?
I'd say just my final thoughts on Keegan Thompson here is watch his poise, his on the mound. We saw it in his 20-something appearances out of the bullpen. The dude is just up there, and he commands that mound, which is just awesome to see at a young age. He hasn't had a ton of major league, but he's on the mound. That's his, and that's just awesome to see, because you believe in him regardless of what's happening. He succeeded this year. There's no question of whatever he does the rest of the season, he has succeeded this year. So it's nice to see just the way he commands himself on the mound and the game. So I'd say really keep an eye on that, just how confident he is. I think I mentioned this when you talked about Justin Steele one time. They got a little bit of Southern anger in them, just give me the damn ball, we'll get shit done, and just go, and I think it's just awesome. So I am looking forward to seeing him on the mound.
That is my favorite descriptive term that you've ever used, Joe, is that the Southern anger just cracks me up every time you use it. And it's not even because it's a bad thing. It's just it's comical because people understand where that's coming from. But I agree with you, man. Him and Steele, that is, I think, what was most impressive when they were coming out of the pen this year, is like you said, it's just the way they command the mound for being as young as they are and losing the 2020 season because of COVID and all these other terrible things. They've persevered and been very impressive this year. Coming out of the pen, I mean, sure, Steele's ERA is now over 3, and that's because he's given up some runs as a starter, but I mean, he was coming into to his first start with a 2.03 ERA out of the pen, I believe.
Mhm.
And now Keegan's coming in now with a 2.21. I mean, these guys were dynamite out of the pen for the Cubs, and they did show a lot of that poise and that kind of that moxie that you want out of a starter, that that presence on the mound. And like you said, man, I'm excited to see number 71. I'm assuming they're keeping the same numbers that they wore before. Obviously, Steele returned and still wore 35. I would imagine Thompson will wear 71 again. It's a cool looking number for a baseball player, and I'm excited
66.
to watch him. 66, baby, the legend of Rafael Ortega. Is your Fly the W player Keegan Thompson? Out of curiosity,
why the hell not? I'm just like he's going to be the one who I have my eyes on the most tomorrow. So
I like it. Yeah, I'm right there with you, man. I'm just tomorrow for Cubs fans. It's all on how does Keegan do. If they win, awesome. If they don't, did Keegan have a good start? That's the question that we'll be asking, and hopefully that we'll be talking a little bit about on Sunday when the Cubs on Tap crew does return. As much as I would also like to pick Keegan, I like to differentiate things and allow people to have their own and say, hey, I nailed that Fly the W pick. I'm going to go ahead and take my boy Rafael Ortega. I think he needs to get on the hype train. Maybe it's going to be warm at Wrigley tomorrow. Wind's going to be blowing out. Maybe puts one in the bleachers.
He's going to have to start showing. So Bubic is a lefty, so he starts showing something against a lefty. He hasn't really had too much success. So
we'll give him the Jock Peterson treatment. We need to see something against the lefty. So I'm going to go ahead and take Rafael. But Frank Schwindel might not be a bad secondary pick, because if he gets back on the legendary Frank Schwindel train and has a double and maybe a home run tomorrow, I'll be happy because he's on my fantasy team. So that shows you where I'm at. I have a really banged up roster right now. COVID and just this season alone has kicked my roster's ass in terms of injuries. But nonetheless, I don't want to get us too far off topic. Well, ladies and gentlemen, for those that joined and are still listening live or listening via podcast, we thank you for joining us today here at Cubs on Tap with myself and Joe. Want to remind you, Cubs on Tap is the official Cubs podcast of the On Tap Sports Network. You can go ahead and check out all of our great work over at www.ontapsportsnet.com and at OnTapSportsNet on social media. That is Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, you name it. We're there. You can also find our pod-specific account. That is at Cubbies, Cubbies on Tap, both Twitter and Instagram for that. I am at Loose on Tap on Twitter. Joe is at Joe Maris on Twitter. And you can follow all of our other great contributors here at Cubs on Tap, at Juice on Tap, at Cody on Tap, at Marty the Ball, at The Riot 326, and so many more that contribute to Cubs for On Tap Sportsnet. Also, Bears, Bulls, Blackhawks. All three of those teams ramping up. Bulls released their schedule today. We know who they're going to be playing in 2021-22. The Blackhawks are starting to ramp things up. All the newest players got their official jersey numbers. And the Bears, obviously, Justin Fields versus Trubisky tomorrow is going to be a big headline. So be sure to tune in with our Bears on Tap, Four Feathers, and Bulls on Tap crews as their seasons approach. And yes, Cubs fans, we all have at least one friend that's a White Sox fan. You bring them to us as well, because the Sox on Tap guys do a great job covering the Southsiders. So once again, you can find us www.ontapsportsnet.com and at OnTapSportsNet on social media. The On Tap Sports Network. Go ahead and check out what's on tap in Chicago sports. Joe, this was a good one. Unfortunately, not a great game to talk about, but a lot of hype and a lot of excitement for tomorrow's game with Keegan Thompson going to be on the mound. Like I said, we here at Cubs on Tap will be back for sure on Sunday. You might hear from a few of the guys throughout the day tomorrow, especially if Keegan has a good start, perhaps a Twitter Live, just a video, some thoughts, whatever. But make sure you're following along with everybody here at Cubs on Tap as that happens. And like I said, we'll be back on Sunday, hopefully talking about a Cubs series win. I mean, kind of happened last time. They lose game 1 to the Reds and they win 2 out of 3. Maybe we'll speak it into existence a little bit here. But nonetheless, we'll wrap this thing up. Joe, always a pleasure, my friend. And what do you say? We get out of here the only way we know how?
Let's do it. Let's go Cubs.
Let's go Cubbies.